Spring break that year, the gang, Maya, the firecracker with an infectious laugh, Ben, the perpetually broke artist with a heart of gold, and Sarah, the voice of reason who somehow kept us all tethered to reality, decided to go all out. We pooled our meager savings, raided every discount code we could find online, and ended up with a weekend yacht rental down at the coast. "Are you seriously telling me we're actually doing this?" I asked, squinting at the sleek white yacht bobbing in the marina. It felt surreal, like we'd stumbled into a movie set. "Yup," Maya grinned, her dark eyes sparkling with mischief. "Sun, sea, and enough questionable life choices to last a lifetime." The salty breeze whipped my hair into a frenzy as we set sail. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning my skin the color of a well-worn leather jacket. The rhythmic slap of waves against the hull was a soothing lullaby, punctuated by the raucous laughter of my friends as they tried to master the art of sailing. Docking at the yacht club for lunch, we were greeted by a scene straight out of a luxury magazine. Gleaming yachts lined the pier, their owners sipping cocktails under giant umbrellas. We, however, stuck out like sore thumbs in our mismatched beach wear and overflowing backpacks. Suddenly, a voice broke through the cacophony. "Lost, are you?" I turned to see him, a man with eyes that held the blue of the ocean and a smile that could melt glaciers. He was tall, tanned, and exuded an aura of effortless confidence that made my breath hitch. No," stammered Sarah, ever the social butterfly. "Just admiring the scenery." "Well, the best scenery is always out at sea," he said, his gaze settling on me. "My name's Anthony. You guys wouldn't happen to be looking for an adventure, would you?" A slow smile crept across my face. "Adventure?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow at Maya, who shrugged mischievously. "Maybe. What kind of adventure did you have in mind?" "How about I take you all for a spin?" Anthony gestured towards his own yacht, even bigger and more luxurious than the others around us. "My treat." I exchanged another glance with Maya. "We can't exactly jest." "Come on, Kylie," Ben chimed in, his artist's eyes gleaming with excitement. "When are we ever going to get another chance to sail on a yacht like that?" "Yeah," Maya added, nudging me with her elbow. "Live a little, right?" Anthony chuckled. "Exactly. So, what do you say?" Hesitation flickered across me. This whole situation felt too good to be true. But then I looked at my friends, their faces brimming with anticipation, and the accountant in me took a back seat to the thrill seeker. "All right," I said, a grin spreading across my face. "Let's do it." Stepping onto Anthony's yacht was like entering another world. Plush carpeting, gleaming mahogany furniture, and a stocked bar that could rival any high-end restaurant, it was the kind of luxury I'd only ever seen in magazines. "Wow," I breathed, taking it all in. "Welcome aboard," Anthony said, offering me his hand. His touch sent a jolt through me, a spark that had nothing to do with the borrowed life raft vest strapped to my chest. The rest of the weekend felt like a dream. We snorkeled in crystal-clear waters, kayaked through secluded coves, and spent evenings sprawled on the deck under a sky thick with stars. Anthony and I spent most of the time together, talking about everything and nothing. He was funny, intelligent, and surprisingly down-to-earth, despite his obvious wealth. By the time we reluctantly disembarked at the end of the weekend, we were both sporting impressive tans and a connection that went deeper than just sun-kissed skin. We exchanged numbers, promising to stay in touch, and a small part of me wondered if this was the end of our fairy tale. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A few days later, Anthony called, inviting me to a quaint little cafe he knew. We spent hours lost in conversation, and by the end of the night, it was clear that the spark we'd shared on the yacht had only grown stronger. We started dating soon after, and it felt like everything fell into place. Anthony treated me like a queen, showering me with affection and introducing me to a world I'd never known existed. Fine dining, weekend getaways, and even a surprise hot air balloon ride, he pulled out all the stops. A year later, while on a romantic weekend in Paris, Anthony got down on one knee, a dazzling diamond ring glinting in the candlelight. "Kylie," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "will you marry me?" Tears welled up in my eyes. Yes, I whispered, the word a burst of joy and disbelief. Meeting his mother, Eleanor, was a different story altogether. A tall, imposing woman with an icy stare that could curdle milk, she surveyed me from head to toe the moment I stepped through the door of their mansion. "So, you're the one who captured Anthony's heart," she said, her tone laced with something that felt suspiciously like disdain. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Davenport," I replied, trying to project an air of confidence despite the butterflies fluttering in my stomach. The rest of the evening was a tense affair. Eleanor made subtle jabs about my background, Reed, not born with a silver spoon, and seemed determined to find fault with everything I did. Anthony, bless his heart, tried to bridge the gap, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, as I was getting ready to leave, Eleanor pulled me aside. "Look, Kylie," she said, her voice surprisingly low. "I may not be thrilled about your social standing. But Anthony loves you, and that's all that matters. Just don't disappoint him." The eyes were barely dry before Anthony announced, with a mischievous glint in his eyes, "There's a little surprise waiting for you at the company, Mrs. Davenport." Eleanor's perfectly arched eyebrow shot up. "A surprise, you say?" Her voice held a hint of suspicion, a quality I was becoming increasingly familiar with. "Just a little something to keep Kylie busy," Anthony reassured her, squeezing my hand. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What surprise? The surprise turned out to be a corner office overlooking the bustling city skyline and a shiny new title, assistant accountant. Eleanor Davenport Industries, a steel and concrete empire built from scratch by the formidable woman herself, was now my workplace. Working alongside Anthony was a dream come true. We exchanged stolen glances and whispered jokes during meetings, a secret language only we understood. But navigating the minefield that was Eleanor's presence was a whole other story. Our interactions were limited to clipped greetings and terse exchanges during family dinners. It was a tense ballet of forced smiles and polite conversation, punctuated by Anthony's booming laughter as he tried, mostly in vain, to lighten the mood. Years flew by in a blur of board meetings, quarterly reports, and the gnawing ache of an unfulfilled dream. Getting pregnant, it seemed, wasn't as simple as the sappy romance novels I devoured in college. Doctor visits became a routine, each negative pregnancy test a tiny punch to the gut. Anthony remained a rock, his love unwavering, but I saw the flicker of disappointment cloud his eyes sometimes. I buried myself in work, pouring my energy into the company. Eleanor, surprisingly, didn't seem to mind. In fact, she'd occasionally toss a compliment my way, acknowledging a well-structured report or a particularly insightful suggestion. It was a small victory, a grudging acceptance of my abilities, but a victory nonetheless. One evening, after a particularly grueling board meeting, Eleanor caught me packing up my briefcase. "You're good at your job, Kylie," Eleanor began, her voice devoid of its usual frostiness. "Damn good, actually." A shy smile tugged at the corner of my lips. "Thank you, Mrs. Davenport." "But," she continued, her gaze turning steely, "work shouldn't be your entire life. You and Anthony." She trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. But the unspoken message hung heavy in the air. "You and Anthony need to start a family." "We're trying," I blurted out, surprising myself with my honesty. "We've been trying for years, but..." Eleanor leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "Sometimes," she said finally, "life doesn't always go according to plan. But that doesn't mean there isn't happiness to be found." Her words were cryptic, yet strangely comforting. Was it a softening? A flicker of empathy beneath the steely exterior? It was hard to tell. At one of the family dinners at Eleanor's house, Anthony strutted into the kitchen, a triumphant grin plastered on his face. "Guess who just hired the most stunning secretary the company's ever seen?" he announced, wrapping his arm around me in a hug that felt more performative than usual. I stifled a sigh. Anthony had a way of making even the most mundane announcements sound like earth-shattering news. "Really?" I managed, forcing a smile. Who is she? Tiffany, he said, his voice dropping a seductive octave. Blonde hair, legs that go on for miles, and a smile that could melt glaciers. Eleanor, who had been engrossed in the financial section of the newspaper, finally lowered it with a sigh. New secretary, huh? She said, her gaze sharp as a hawk's. Yeah. Anthony beamed. Think she'll liven up the place a bit, don't you? Let's just hope she can handle a phone and a keyboard, I muttered under my breath. The remark slipped out before I could stop it. Anthony's grin faltered, and a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. Come on, Kylie, he said, his voice laced with a playful jab. Don't be jealous, because the new girl has legs that could go all the way to next Tuesday. Heat flooded my cheeks. Jealous? Honestly, the thought hadn't even crossed my mind. I was more concerned about Anthony's hiring practices than threatened by some clueless blonde bombshell. But before I could retort, Eleanor slammed her newspaper down on the table, the sound echoing through the opulent dining room. Jealous? She boomed, her voice laced with steel. Kylie is your wife, and a damn good accountant at that. You'd do well to remember that. Looks fade, Anthony, but intelligence and loyalty? Those are qualities to treasure. My jaw dropped. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine Eleanor coming to my defense like that. A flicker of warmth, a rare spark of something resembling approval, warmed her icy blue eyes. Anthony, still flustered, mumbled an apology. Look, Kylie, I was just kidding around. Tiffany seems eager to learn, that's all. I wasn't quite convinced, but I decided not to push it any further. Eleanor's unexpected intervention had caught me off guard, but I couldn't deny it felt good to have her on my side, even for a fleeting moment. Months crawled by, and Tiffany, the so-called secretary, remained a thorn in my side. Her skirts seemed to get shorter with each passing week, clinging to her curves like a second skin. One particularly egregious day, she sashayed into the office wearing a blouse that wouldn't have looked out of place in a nightclub. Honey, I couldn't help but mutter under my breath, this is an office, not a peep show. Tiffany, of course, had to overhear. She stopped mid-twirl, a saccharine smile plastered on her face. Oh, this old thing? She cooed, batting her eyelashes at me. Unlike some of us, I can actually pull off any style. It was infuriating. The way she sashayed around the office, her every movement calculated to draw attention, was like nails on a chalkboard. Worse, Anthony seemed completely oblivious, or worse, encouraging it. The final straw came one evening when Anthony, reeking of cologne that wasn't mine, announced he was dropping Tiffany off at home since she missed her bus. Maybe I should take a cab home more often, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. Since you seem to be so busy these days. Anthony's face flushed. That's not what I meant, he stammered. Look, it's nothing. Just a ride home. No big deal. But it was a big deal. It was a giant, flashing neon sign screaming infidelity right in my face. And I was done ignoring it. The walk home felt like an eternity. The city lights blurred into a kaleidoscope of colors as tears streamed down my face, each drop a tiny shard of heartbreak. A taxi finally screeched to a halt, its yellow glow a beacon in the gathering darkness. As the night deepened, the silence in the apartment became deafening. Anthony still hadn't come home. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel lonely. I felt adrift, unmoored from the life I thought I'd built. The following days were a blur of forced normalcy. Anthony avoided me, his apology text a pathetic attempt at damage control. I kept my head down at work, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry bees in a hive. Then, one seemingly ordinary Tuesday, the dam broke. I was heading to the break room for a much-needed coffee fix when I heard a familiar giggle coming from Anthony's office. My heart skipped a beat, a cold dread settling in my stomach. Without a second thought, I threw open the door, the sight that greeted me making the blood drain from my face. Anthony was sprawled on the couch, his tie askew, his face flushed. Tiffany, her skirt hiked up to a point of no return, straightened her blouse with a smirk that could curdle milk. "Well," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, the coldness in it sharper than a glacier. "Look who decided to throw an impromptu office party." Anthony scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of guilt and panic. "Kylie, it's not what it looks like," he stammered. "Oh, really?" I raised an eyebrow, my gaze flickering between them. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty damn incriminating." Tiffany, the little viper, had the audacity to laugh. "Relax, uptight. It was just a little fun." "Fun?" I repeated, my voice laced with venom. "At the expense of our marriage? You're both pathetic." That evening, as I sat hunched over a laptop, Anthony sauntered into the living room, a smug grin plastered on his face. He tossed a document onto the coffee table in front of me, the crisp white paper crackling like a gunshot in the silence. "There," he announced, his voice laced with a bravado that did little to mask the underlying nervousness in his eyes. "Divorce papers. Sign them, and let's get this over with. This marriage is over." "It's been over for a while now, frankly." "But, why?" The question tumbled out, raw and desperate. 8 years of my life, poured into this relationship, and this was how it ended? On a crumpled piece of paper, discarded like yesterday's trash? "Why?" he repeated, a cruel edge creeping into his voice. "Because you're, you, Kylie. Uptight, boring, always working. And then there's Tiffany's pregnant," he declared, a smug satisfaction coloring his tone. "We're going to have a baby. A real family." The words were a slap in the face, a cold reminder of the unfulfilled dreams that haunted the quiet corners of our marriage. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them back, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. "So, sign the papers," he repeated, his voice clipped with impatience. "The sooner the better. Frankly, you just annoy me." Annoy him? After all these years, all I was an annoyance? A bitter laugh escaped my lips, a harsh, humorless sound that echoed in the sterile silence of the room. "Get out," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Just get out of my sight." Anthony hesitated for a moment, a flicker of something like surprise crossing his face. Then, with a shrug, he turned and headed for the bedroom. Moments later, the rumble of a suitcase being dragged across the floor filled the apartment. He emerged a few minutes later, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't look at me, didn't even offer a goodbye. He simply opened the door, stepped out, and slammed it shut behind him with a finality that sent a tremor through the room. Tears finally spilled down my cheeks, hot and unchecked. I crumpled onto the couch, the weight of his betrayal a physical ache in my chest. After a while, I stumbled to my feet and picked up the divorce papers, my gaze blurring over the legalese. Suddenly, the urge to fight, to not go down without a battle, surged through me. But who could I turn to? My parents were gone, and my friends, scattered across the country, felt like a distant memory. Then, a thought struck me, a lifeline thrown across the churning sea of despair. Eleanor. She might not have been the warmest mother-in-law, but she was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who wouldn't hesitate to take down anyone who threatened her family. Eleanor's opulent living room felt more like a war room than a place of comfort. The air crackled with barely contained fury as I explained Anthony's callous departure and Tiffany's supposed pregnancy. That conniving little tart. Eleanor spat, her voice laced with ice. "And Anthony? The spineless worm. Leaving you for a..." She trailed off, searching for an insult that could adequately express her disgust. "For someone like her." Her words, surprisingly comforting, sparked a flicker of defiance within me. "There's more," I said, my voice gaining strength. I explained my suspicions about Tiffany, the exorbitant expense reports, and the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Eleanor, her eyes narrowed to slits, listened intently. When I finished, she rose from her chair with a predatory grace that sent shivers down my spine. Disappearing into her study, she returned a few moments later, a file clutched in her hand. "Here," she said, handing it to me. "A little secret audit I commissioned a while back. Just a hunch, you see." I opened the file, my heart hammering in my chest. It was a detailed report outlining Tiffany's creative accounting practices. Apparently, her idea of representative expenses included luxury handbags and weekend getaways. A cold smile touched my lips. This wasn't just about a cheating husband or a vindictive secretary. This was about something bigger. This was about justice. The next morning, I marched into Anthony's office, the secret audit tucked securely under my arm. He and Tiffany were locked in a heated embrace, cooing like a pair of lovebirds. "Shouldn't you be packing your boxes, honey? This is my future husband's office now." Tiffany sneered at me. I ignored her, turning my gaze to Anthony, whose smugness had curdled into confusion. "Actually," I said, a smile playing on my lips, "it seems there's been a bit of a misunderstanding." Before they could react, I placed the file on his desk. "Take a look, Anthony. Seems your little friend here has been a bit creative with the company finances." Tiffany's face drained of color. "What is this?" she sputtered, her voice laced with panic. "Lies. You're trying to slander me." Just then, the office door swung open, revealing Eleanor, a steely glint in her eyes. Anthony, his face pale as a ghost, looked like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Enough of this," Eleanor boomed, her voice silencing the room. She turned to her son, her gaze heavy with disappointment. "Anthony," she said, her voice clipped, "you are hereby dismissed from your position as director. Your blatant disregard for company policy and indulgence in irregular relationships has proven you unfit for the role." Anthony stammered, his protests drowned out by his mother's icy stare. Turning to Tiffany, Eleanor continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "And you, young lady, will be facing charges of embezzlement. Consider this your official termination." The aftermath was a whirlwind. Tiffany, realizing her gravy train had derailed, quickly confessed to Anthony that the pregnancy ploy was a sham. "Honey," she'd purred, "all fake sweetness gone. I don't need a poor lover." With that, she sashayed out of his life as quickly as she'd sashayed in, leaving him floundering and alone. Eleanor, ever the pragmatist, wasted no time. She presented Tiffany with a stark choice: return the fraudulently claimed $15,000 or face a very public lawsuit. Tiffany, with her dreams of extravagance evaporating, chose the former, coughing up the money with a defeated whimper. Needless to say, she was no longer employed by Davenport Industries. As for Anthony, well, let's just say his fall from grace was spectacular. Fired from his position as director, his access to his mother's lavish lifestyle, the fancy cars, the yacht, was swiftly revoked. The divorce proceedings were swift and, thanks to a very good lawyer, financially beneficial for me. Part of me, a bruised and battered part, wanted nothing more than to walk away from Davenport Industries, to leave the memories, and Anthony, behind. But Eleanor surprised me again. Pulling me aside after a particularly grueling board meeting, she looked at me with a newfound respect in her eyes. "Kylie," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard, "this company needs a steady hand. Someone who understands the business, someone with integrity. Someone like you." There was a beat of silence, then I took a deep breath. "All right," I said, a newfound determination filling my voice. "Let's do this." Working with Eleanor was challenging, to say the least. We still had our moments, our disagreements, but there was a newfound respect between us. We were a team, united in our vision for the future of Davenport Industries. One evening, as I was leaving the office, Eleanor stopped me. "Going out?" she asked, a hint of curiosity in her voice. "Just grabbing some takeout," I replied. "Nothing fancy?" "Well," she said, surprising me again, "care to join me for dinner sometime? We could discuss business over a decent meal." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. Then, a laugh bubbled up from my chest, genuine and carefree. "I'd like that," I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. The future, once uncertain, now stretched before me, filled with possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly hopeful. The road ahead might have unexpected turns, but I was ready to face them, head-on, with a newfound strength and a formidable, and surprisingly friendly, ally by my side.